David Starkey said, well, he said quite a few things that are very sensible, but on this occasion he said something that struck me like a bucket full of cold water, and it encapsulates everything that's wrong with this country, and unfortunately it appears to be heading your way, America. David Starkey said, "You can't run a government as a charity." And that is the theory behind socialism, really. You're running a government as a charity. And there are many reasons to want to give free stuff to people who've become very unfortunate in some way or the other, that have illnesses or a lack of money that put them in a very awful position. And that's true. When you see somebody in distress, you wouldn't be human if you didn't want to alleviate that distress. But just look what happens. It doesn't work out like that. In countries where they are instituting socialism, the country goes to the dogs. And it ends up with rich people getting richer and poor people just getting poorer because there isn't enough to go round. And America knew that a few years ago. And you have the example of California, the horrible example of California, to remind yourself of how bad socialism can be, or rather extreme socialism. And blow me down, you're about to elect that same sort of system in New York. Look what has happened to Britain. Take a lesson. If you know, that one, if you can't be a shining example, be a horrible warning. That's what's happened to Britain. We've been running our government as a charity, and the charities have taken over, and there's no money. Britain is in terrible debt, and the government we have now is putting it into even more debt. I'm Granniopteryx. If you like this video, please click like, please share the video, please subscribe. That's really important. If you want to contribute financially, and remember I say not if it hurts, but if you do want to contribute financially, I am of course very pleased with that because I spend a lot of time making these videos. But really, like, share and subscribe is a great deal of help for this channel. Okay, take it away, Granniopteryx. I said this about the Rachel Reeves mess in our country, the latest budget has introduced. And I was talking about non-domiciled rich people who come here, they pay less tax, and they are allowed to stay here as non-citizens, technically not residents. And they do that because they like what's happening in Britain. They like the theatres and the countryside and the various things that happen here. But they leave when the government starts eyeing their money with green-eyed envy. And that's the problem with socialism, you see, because if you hermetically seal your country, like East Germany, they had a wall around them. People couldn't leave. If your country has kidnapped you and has prevented you from leaving, then they can tax you as much as they want. They can redistribute your wealth. They can even order what jobs you're going to have. And there's nothing you can do about it. But if you live in a country where people can leave when they don't like what the country is doing to them anymore, then you've got a problem. So the non-domiciled people who came here with loads of money, which they might not have spent on taxes, but which they did spend on services. Like rich people don't want to do a lot of laundry, so they'll use cleaning services. They will often order meals or go out for dinner to expensive restaurants. They'll buy expensive cars and very fashionable and overpriced clothing, all that sort of stuff. Well, they're just going. When Rachel Reeves started to impose her taxes on non-domiciled residents here, they just upped sticks and left. And that's what's going to happen to New York. Oh, New Yorkers, I'm talking to you. If you elect Mamdani, he has this idea of state, more or less, state grocery stores. They had that system in Russia, by the way. You had a state grocery store in your neighbourhood, and you'd have to go to that store so that they could distribute, this is the theory, so they could distribute the food equally for each part of the system. It never worked. And what ended up happening was you had to bribe the shop owner to get certain stuff under the counter. It's all very well talking about a state grocery store with controlled prices. It's beautiful to talk about rent control. Poor people who can hardly afford the rent in the place they're in would find it very appealing when somebody's going to come along and say, right, your landlord can't charge more than that, or there's a better place down there which you would be able to get for the same rent because they're rent controlled. Thomas Sowell talked about rent control in his book. I don't remember what his book was called. Simple Economics or Economics for Dummies or something. Anyway, but he talked specifically about a problem of finding accommodation in New York because of rent controls. And he said that, for instance, if you have a low rent place and you move somewhere else, you will hang on to the low rent place because you're not spending that much on it. And this will... there was a mayor, apparently. He lived outside New York, and then he had a flat. He had an apartment which had rent control on it. But he lived elsewhere, and he used that rent control place just intermittently. But he hung on to it because it was rent controlled. It didn't cost him that much, and he lived in much more splendour somewhere outside town. And he was just one. This would be happening with all sorts of people. And then, of course, as we know, landlords, many of them aren't great big cigar-chomping capitalists. They are people who happen to own a couple of apartments that they rent out. If they can't make a profit on those apartments, they won't keep them up. They either won't maintain them and then the neighbourhood goes down, or they'll just sell up and go. And that's the point. When you're living in a free society, you can sell up and go. And I'm afraid that Mamdani's ideas, lovely as they sound, will end up with a lot of people just selling up and going. The New York that you know now will no longer exist. Now, I agree that there are parts of New York that some of you may not wish to know now, but it'll be a lot worse if this guy gets into power. And what I don't understand is how Americans who, looking east, can see what's happened in Britain to socialism, what it's done to the great British enterprise. And they still might think that Mamdani is a good idea. It's a problem of democracy, isn't it? Because how can you not give very stupid people the vote? they have the right to vote as much as anyone else. And of course, they won't be aware of Thomas Sowell's appeal to reason, or indeed even David Starkey's appeal to reason. It's going to be a bit of a problem for you if he wins. And I'm sorry about that, because America was always my shining hope. Okay, till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.